Hello everybody, Glass Half Dead here, and today I want to talk to you about Kasrkin, Warhammer 40k, Blackstone Fortress, and then obviously primarily Kill Team. But there's a lot to discuss. Obviously we're going to talk about the bases of the Kasrkin, because apparently that's the kind of people we want to be. And also I'm going to talk about, well, whether or not they're going to have a Kill Team, and then also what we think that Kill Team may actually be. So, the Kasrkin. We've all seen them. I've scrubbed through all of the footage. And I'm going to talk about what I saw in that footage and what I think it might mean, and how I think we might be able to guess for the first time what this team may do. Because you see, in the past when it comes to Kill Team, we haven't been able to guess. It could be literally anything. But I think we actually have a pretty good base of reference going from Compendium, looking at Vet Guard, and now going from the Scions, looking at Kasrkin. However, before we can discuss that, we first have to say, look, I have merch. I also have a Patreon. Talking of Patreon, hey, this new Phobos team that everybody likes, in that there is a marksman. And that marksman is just a sniper. And you know what sniper wears Phobos armor? Eliminators. But you don't get an eliminator in the box. If you join my Patreon at the end of the month, I'm going to be giving away 3 eliminators. All you have to do is be signed up to my Patreon at the end of this month. Okay, let's talk about who are the Kasrkin. For those of you that do not know, Kasrkin are the special forces of Cadia, specifically. You know, that planet that no longer exists. In fact, you know what, let's not get into it. It doesn't matter, okay? To cut a long story short, you may be familiar with the Scions of the Imperial Guard. Well, they superseded the old metal Kasrkins, who in turn seeded the old metal Stormtroopers. Stormtroopers, Kasrkins, Scions, back to Kasrkins. That seems to be how it's going. Scions and Kasrkins are different, like, thematically, but they're the same thing. There is a question of, are Kasrkin going to be a kill team? Now that is something we cannot truly know. There is no way to know that. There is no way to even make an educated guess. However, we can, before we get to that, look at their bases. If we look at the image that the Kasrkin have been released in, we see that their bases do not match all of the other Cadian stood around them. The other Cadian have a very standard, like, patchy grass. These Kasrkin do not have that. They have little bits of stone, but like really little, not like rubble, like teeny tiny bits of stone. And it's a very black base. It's the kind of base that fits in with the Blackstone Fortress game and the expansions thereof. So we have to think, are they going to be an expansion for Blackstone Fortress? A game that, although you cannot buy the expansions, you can still buy the original boxed game for. Maybe. The only thing I can really relate it to is if you think back to an old game now that was actually the relaunch of the Genestealer Cultists. It's the Deathwatch Overkill box. Deathwatch Overkill, what is that? It's Genestealer Cults versus Deathwatch. Nice. However, they, a few months after they released that game, released a White Dwarf article that allowed you to take a group of Scions into the game instead of the Deathwatch. Pure custom homebrew rule stuff, it was fine. I never played it, unfortunately. I hear it's very good. However, you could take Scions in there. Kasrkin are the new Scions. Deathwatch Overkill, standalone game that involves running through a maze. It's a dungeon crawler. So is Blackstone Fortress. So, are we going to have our Imperials that are not rogue traders, they're true Imperials, going and looking through the Blackstone Fortress? The Blackstone Fortress, on the off chance you don't know because you haven't listened to Henry Cavill. Oh, he did a thing about it. Everybody knows. Okay, nobody's watching my channel that hasn't watched Henry Cavill talk about the Blackstone Fortresses. Okay. Long story short, chaosy. So based purely on the bases, I would actually guess Kasrkin are going to be in Blackstone Fortress. Now, that doesn't mean they won't be in other things too, obviously. In fact, if I had to guess, I think that Games Workshop is going to make the Kasrkin a Blackstone Fortress expansion that we then get a White Dwarf kill team for. If you ignore everything else, if you take that in a vacuum, I think that is the case. However, I actually cannot possibly see GW making a hotly anticipated models line, a refresh, the Kasrkin, for a dead game. Not Kill Team, no. We'll talk about the roadmap and the lack of it later, thank you. No, I mean Blackstone Fortress, a standalone game. I don't think Kasrkin are actually going to be there, but based on the evidence, they will. Will we get a kill team of Kasrkin? Obviously, there is no way to know, it's pure speculation, but I would be shocked if we didn't. Like, legitimately, they're the special forces of the Imperial Guard. They're some of the most famous special forces. Special forces is all about covert ops. Kill Team is literally a covert ops simulation game. If we don't get them, I'll be very confused. Exceptionally confused. But there's no way to know until we get it. You know how GW is. Even when you get a roadmap, their roadmap is literally just, hey, we know your game exists. We're not going to tell you what we're doing for it, but we know. Great, thanks. Good stuff, G-dubs. Anyway, we don't know. However, if we assume that they are, I think we could take a pretty good guess at their rules. I went over to Wikipedia and I checked out the Scion's rules and, from the Compendium teams, there is the Imperial Guard Compendium team. That team can take a team of regular guardsmen or a team of Scions. The regular guardsmen, essentially, like if you just look at their rules, are the veteran guardsmen. When you become a specialist team, the Imperial Guardsmen became veteran guardsmen. Easy. And I suspect that the Scions will become Kasrkin. So if we look at what the veteran guard took from the guardsmen, we can also look at what the Scions get and have a think about how we might extrapolate that out to a specialist team. Because again, let's be super clear, Scions and Kasrkin are the same. They might be different models, but they're the same, okay? First things first, they will probably get orders. Now, I'm a little bit uncertain on this one, because certainly in Compendium, both of the leaders, whether from the Guardsmen or from the Scions, could issue orders. The difference was, with the Guardsmen, you had to be within 6 of the Commsmen. He gave it to everybody. With the Scions, everyone just got it, because obviously you're a little bit better equipped, and so you all have comm beads in your ears. You don't need the boosting of a Commsman. Okay, so they might get Scions, but then isn't it going to be a little bit odd to have the same orders from 2 teams? You know, reroll ones, move, all that good stuff. Hard to say. Maybe they get different orders, but also maybe they just do it. Maybe they just say, yeah, same orders. However, the Scions had access to another tactic, an order, it was in the orders section, strategic ploy, that the Imperial Guardmen did not get. And that was called, I believe, Special Forces. What this did is, for 1 CP, it allowed all of your Scions to perform the pickup or a mission action for 1 APL less. I suspect that's just going to be baked into their datasheet. That's going to be their special ability. So they will almost be, in some missions, a pseudo APL3, much like Corsairs get a free dash, and so become a pseudo APL3. Scions, Kasrkin, I suspect, will have that baked into them instead. A free pickup action or a free mission action. And it's possible, and obviously, I think that's a safe guess. I think that's an easy one to make. But I think it's also possible that actually they might be a pseudo APL3 in the sense that they also always count as having 3 APL per body when they're on a point. They will, however, be limited to 10 bodies. I think that's an easy guess. And then if you look at them being limited to 10 bodies, you've got to look at Corsairs, who are limited at 9. That's a weird one. Yeah. That's a weird one. Poor Corsairs is all I can really say. But let's move on from that. So looking at the official slightly higher resolution than the previous potato cameras that we got, we have to look at the models. We clearly see that the leader has a plasma pistol and I would guess a power sword. I think in the picture he's actually equipped with a chainsword, but I believe that they will also be given access to a power sword. So Sergeant with plasma, great. Who cares about the power sword? The plasma's what you're there for. It's really good stuff. We then have a comms. I think that's an obvious one. He's going to be your +1 APL guy. Or are we going to be doing more comms like how the Phobos got comms, which could be very interesting. I'm actually really liking how the Phobos comms work. I'm going to be honest. I kind of prefer that to +1 APL. But who knows? Impossible to tell until we get some more teams before the Kasrkin. We then also have an Auspex guy. Now, we've seen Auspex and we've seen Omnispecs. They're similar but slightly different. I would suspect that the Omnispecs has always been specific to the Adeptus Mechanicus, and so our Auspex is going to just be an identical Auspex to what the Space Marines get. We then also see somebody else. Now, I couldn't quite tell what this model was. Needless to say, he has a pistol instead of the hotshot las gun, and I think, if you zoom in, he has something behind his hip. I think it's white, and therefore I would assume he's a medic, which obviously makes perfect sense. But he could be some sort of demolitions guy, because he's messing around with a magazine in his belt, which isn't very medic-like. But then, yeah, hard to know with that one. I would get medic is a safe bet. They're obviously going to have a medic. I assume it's going to be your standard heal for 2d3 wounds and stop someone from being incapacitated for an APL. And then, of course, you're going to have, I would guess, because it's Scions, I think you might be able to go at least 3 gunners instead of the usual 2, but maybe even 4. That really depends how their 40k datasheet works out. But I assume that their big deal would be 3 gunners, which presumably will be plasma, obviously, melter, flamer, grenade launcher, hotshot volley gun, and I think that's all of their base ones. So they get 5 options. They'll be able to take either 3 or 4. It's possible they will get access to a sniper as well, a long shot lasgun, but we don't really know yet. But that would be a step away from what the Kasrkin got in the past. It's a step away from what the Scions got, but snipers are really cool, so I kind of hope they do get it. And then, long shot, obviously, but there's also a brand new Commissar model in the back of the picture. Is it possible that we're going to get Cadian Kasrkin backed up, well, led by a Commissar, a new model? I don't know. I'm just saying it was in the picture, and then for some reason the article on Warcom didn't mention it. And then I think all the team needs to just kind of round them out, whatever these abilities are, whatever they might actually get, is just like a 1 EP equipment vortex grenade. That'll really cap them off. All right, everybody. This has been Glass Half Dead. I hope you've enjoyed. Talk to me about Kasrkin. I like the new models. I think they're great. Goodbye.